How does king safety relate to weak squares? Have you ever wondered how the safety of your king connects to weak squares on the chessboard? This relationship is essential for both beginners and seasoned players. Let's break it down in simple terms. First, let's define what weak squares are. A weak square is a square on the board that cannot be defended by your pawns. These squares can become prime spots for your opponent's pieces, especially knights. Knights love to settle on weak squares because they cannot be easily challenged by pawns. Now, king safety is all about how well protected your king is from attacks. A safe king is usually castled behind a solid pawn structure. This means there are no weak squares nearby that enemy pieces can use to launch an attack. When weak squares are near your king, they can become dangerous entry points for your opponent. If the pawns in front of your king are pushed or missing, weak squares are left behind. This allows enemy pieces to invade and threaten your king. For instance, after castling kingside, the pawns in front of your king, typically on f2, g2, and h4 white, create a strong barrier. These pawns control important squares and limit enemy access. If you push these pawns without a plan, you risk creating weak squares that can be exploited by your opponent. Conversely, if your king's surrounding squares are weak, your king is more exposed to attacks. This can lead to tactical threats like checks or even checkmate if your opponent takes advantage of those weak squares. For beginners, early castling is a good strategy. It moves your king away from the center and places it behind a protective pawn shield. This reduces the number of weak squares around your king, improving its safety. Be cautious about pushing the pawns in front of your castled king. Only do this if you can control the resulting weak squares with your pieces. Each pawn move can create new weak squares and open lines for your opponent. Controlling the center of the board is also important for king safety. It restricts your opponent's ability to maneuver their pieces into attacking positions near your king. When you spot weak squares around your opponent's king, try to place your pieces, especially knights, on those squares. This creates strong outposts and puts pressure on your opponent's position. Lastly, maintaining a solid pawn structure in front of your king is key. This prevents weak squares from appearing and keeps your king well defended. In short, the safety of your king is closely tied to the presence of weak squares. Protecting your king involves castling early, keeping a compact pawn structure, and avoiding unnecessary pawn moves. At the same time, look for opportunities to exploit weak squares near your opponent's king. Understanding this relationship helps you balance defense and offense in your games.